Guruji, what is unique about Indian classical music compared to other schools of music? And how does one go about developing a taste for Indian classical music?
Our classical Indian music is, apart from being very ancient, it goes back to almost 2000 or 2500 years. But main thing, the difference is that like the Western music originally was, also which started from the church music, the Gregorian chants, and it became a performing art, a written down music, composed music later on. Whereas our Indian tradition was such that it was handed down from the guru to his disciple. And it was completely an oral tradition. That's the big difference. We don't write our music. And because it has been handed down from person to person, along with the music itself, the whole spiritual context, which is so much together with the music, has been also preserved, which one still finds in our music, which is a big difference. And to hear and appreciate Indian classical music for people especially who are oriented to Western classical music or say jazz or pop music, etc. Actually, people who are oriented to jazz and pop, they have no much problem, I have seen. But the people who have been brought up with the tradition of Western classical music, they do have a problem. And that is why I always request them to have an open mind when they listen to our music. Like not to expect harmony, counterpoint, modulation, and basic things that is very important to the Western classical music, or the chords, you know, because our music is principally dwelling with the melody, rich melodies and very complex rhythmic patterns. I mean, nowhere else in the whole wide world people have gone so high or developed the rhythm, you know, the mathematical aspect of our rhythm. But and it is improvised, of course. That's where people always try to compare it with jazz, which is wrong, because there's superficial resemblance with jazz, just the improvisation part. But where jazz improvises on a structure which is filled with chord and harmony, and they just take a theme and then they go in the orbit, they do whatever they want and come back to the theme. We have much more than that. We have to adhere the principles of the ragas, the melody forms. There are hundreds and thousands of them. The ragas are like persons, you know, they have different characters. Some are very happy, some are very serious, some are very playful, some are very erotic, very romantic, etc. And what we do when we start a raga, this melodic form which has its own ascending and descending structure, as well as a motif by which you can recognize the raga, and also important notes that we emphasize on. We have to keep that all the time, you know, we have to be conscious of being in the raga, but at the same time, it is question of years and years of practice and proper training from Guru that gives us that insight of improvising within the framework. Also along with the tala that we choose, a cycle of, it can be anything between 3-beat cycle to 108-beat cycle. So you see, it is not very easy to improvise, keeping all this. But then you see a person who is an adept really and has gone through proper training can go in the orbit in the same manner and endless, infinite patterns of improvisation. It's such an ecstasy. And that is why our music has caught on and stayed on, because in this country things come and go. When I started, you know, almost 40 years ago. Actually, I came, first before any musician came in this
Yes.
area at the age of 12. And from then I have been coming continuously. But when I started touring by myself from 1956, believe me, it was a fantastic experience because I could talk, I could communicate, I could explain. At that time, none of our musicians could do that. But then, by and by, I found each time having bigger and bigger audience. And of course, I was playing in Carnegie Hall and Royal Festival Hall in London, full houses. And then, about 10 years later, only George Harrison came to me as a student. And that started the second big phase, the whole big hullabaloo, as they say, and the young people getting interested. And we can talk about that later. But
Definitely.
coming back to the classical music, what I was saying, that it caught on and it has stayed on. And that is the wonderful thing about our music. Once you start feeling it in you, it seeps in, And the first part, the beginning, which we call the alap or jod, is so full of tranquility. I mean, you feel so much at peace. You can close your eyes and listen to the music, and so it has that spiritual context, which is very important. Whereas the virtuosity and the playing for the gallery part, that is there also, plenty of it, like any other music. And that is the part which average public gets very much caught on.
Yeah.
They
Yes,
get
yes.
excited by the speed, the virtuosity, and the drums and the loudness of the amplification. All that is something else. But the true music, what we think, the highest in our music is the slow and serene, the spiritual aspect.
What is the definition of classical music? And what is the difference between classical music and traditional music?
Well, I don't think there's any problem in analyzing this thing, because a classical music is also a traditional music. But a traditional music need not be a classical music, because think of our folk music, which has been there for thousands of years. The music of the Aborigines,
Yes.
or any other popular music, what is known as bhajans or kavalis, which are religious singing. Those are traditional also, but they are not classical always. That can be popular but traditional. So I personally feel that tradition within the classical music has always gone. It's like a river which has started from the Himalayas and flown into the ocean or the sea. Our music never has stopped growing or developing.
Yes.
It is silly for people to talk about tradition and just argue for nothing, because what is tradition, what is something new today can become tradition tomorrow.
Yes.
That's how Mia Tansen was criticized when he did so many new innovations.
Exactly.
Every musician who has been creative and tried to do something new, they have been criticized. Oh, sacrilege. But afterwards it becomes, even I have seen in the short span of last 30, 40 years, my Guru Baba Alauddin Khan, he was such a tremendously creative person. He had all the traditional training of the background of the, people that we swear by, Mia Tansen and all that. He had all that traditional training, but he was so full of innovations. He has given so many things, and all that is now tradition. Even me, whatever I did, say, 40 years ago, which was, criticized by many people, they are being followed by all young musicians, and
Definitely,
it
yes.
become a tradition. So you see, tradition is within classical music has always gone on, not changing, but being developed into adding up new things. It has always gathered more and more wealth along the way.
Guruji, your thoughts about the present status of Indian classical music here in the US?
I feel it is better than ever before, to tell you the truth, because it has stayed on and it is growing. The number of listeners are growing. People who have understanding for it are more in number than ever before. And that's the wonderful thing about this country particularly. They always have time. They have always time and interest for anything which is new. And I think in the beginning, of course, it was difficult for many musicians to come here. Yes. I was the first one, as you know.
Yes.
And I never had problem. Because, as I said, I could communicate and but then I paved the way, and now I see so many young generation, even my students are coming here and performing and getting good name. Then the famous musicians from India, even elderly ones, they're all having a good audience.
Wonderful. Tell us about your collaborative work with Western classical musicians.
I have collaborated with some of the very famous people which you know, yes. Like he's now Lord Menuhin. Yeah. So I have known him from actually my childhood, but we came again to know each other and became the best of friends from 1952. And I wrote few pieces especially within raga and tala framework, within a classical format. And we played it in his, when he was the director at Bath Festival in England, in the early 60s sometimes. And then we cut album also, which got Grammy award and everything. And then we made 2 more records, and we have performed many places together, those few pieces that I specially composed for him. The famous one was in United Nations Human Rights Day, end of 1967, I think. And we do perform. In fact, we are going to perform again in November 95 in Brussels, which is a special program known as From Sitar to Guitar, because it is focused on the gypsies. Gypsies who went from India through the Middle East, Morocco, Egypt and Spain, and another group went to Europe, the Balkans. And this is very interesting because all the best musicians from, I'm getting some of our Rajasthani musicians.
I see.
And I'm giving a short piece, but it will be very good. I'm co-hosting this with Lord Menuhin.
Wonderful.
This program. And among other collaborations, you know, the famous flautist Jean-Pierre Rampal from France. I have made record and performed a number of places, which I again wrote for him based on classical music. And then others are not really playing along with. I have not performed, but I have worked on a project with Philip Glass, which was very interesting. The record is known as Passages by Private Music Limited. In that, we did that he composed 2 pieces, short pieces, hardly, you know, about 16 bars or so. I did the same thing, 2 pieces. I gave my pieces to him, he gave to me, and we did whatever we wanted with each other's piece, you know, orchestrate and arrangement and all that. And individually we did 1 piece each. I did the one that's known as Prashanti. And so that is a very interesting thing that...
and this is the piece in which you have actually sung the first...
in that Hey Nath.
Yes, Hey Nath. Yeah.
That's true. And then, of course, I have done a lot of things along with Japanese musicians. East greets East. And a lot of jazz and pop musicians, but not performed myself, just, you know, experimented some pieces for recordings mostly. and it has been very interesting.
I have
And of
particular.
course, I'm sorry, I forgot the two major things, the symphony orchestra,
Exactly,
the
exactly.
sitar concerto
Concerto,
with
yeah.
symphony orchestra. The first one was in 1970 for London Symphony Orchestra, which Andre Previn
Yes, conducted.
conducted. And the second one was New York Philharmony,
With Zubin, right?
Zubin
Yeah.
Mehta conducted. Yes, that was in 1980.
Yeah, I think those two are going to go down in history like
Well,
any other compositions of this
it was,
century.
I think, first attempt of that scale.
Exactly. You were the first to synthesize Indian classical music with Western music. Tell us, what do you think about this synthesis between the two forms of music?
Yeah, but I have never thought of fusion, or I have never thought of making a cocktail of both, which is done by many people, and some are very interesting. I appreciate, but my idea was, you see, I don't pretend to know Western music fully, in the sense that I had some basic piano lessons when I was child in Paris, when I went to school. And I don't even read fluently or write fluently Western notation. And but it never, I mean, bothered me, because what I did was keeping mainly the music basically Indian, on a classical format or folk or whatever, contemporary, and using the ragas and the talas. And I always wrote down my compositions and took help of some of my students who know Western notation. And along with that, it always came out as I wanted. So this is what I was interested in, is to have physically a musician non-Indian, A. B. Musical instrument non-Indian. Like we have fantastic, my instrument, I love it, sitar. We have great instruments like sarod, esraj, dilruba, sarangi, shanai, and flutes. But we do have some difficulties with these instruments, because, for instance, the string instruments, they have all sympathetic strings, which is fantastic for individual music. We Indians are very individual.
Yes.
We like to be just by ourselves. It's very rare to have two, three, or an ensemble of musicians. This was not the tradition. In the old murals, you see Veena, Venu,
Venu, yeah.
Veena, and Mridangam,
Yes.
and Manjira, and things like that, maybe four, and a singer perhaps. But you never see ensemble or orchestra. That has been very non-Indian thing. So it has been tried by many people since last 100 years or so. And in fact, my guru Baba Alauddin was one of the pioneers who also had what he called band. In those days, Indian native states.
I see.
He was worked with a native ruler, Maharaja, in Maihar state. So he had a band, of mostly few Indian instruments, and then he had the cello, he had clarinet, he had harmonium and violin. So he tried with some of new compositions that he made, and it was very interesting. That inspired me a lot. Then I had a chance to work in All India Radio, started the Vadya Vrinda. So I had my own few years of training myself how to do something without aping the West. Just unnecessary harmony, just take a chord of three, third or fourth or fifth. That I didn't do much really. I wanted to keep it as much as possible melodic and Indian by nature, but use the tremendous range of the Western instruments, octaves.
Octaves, yeah.
And the depth of the sound and the volume, the dynamics. Our instruments really don't go very far. It's very soft. As I said, it's more for, and this sympathetic strings always disturb, because you strike a note, two notes, and it is reverb,
Exactly.
and so I thought they were not very suitable for bigger orchestra,
Orchestra.
which I tried again and again in my All India radio days. And that's why I was looking forward to try something with the Western Symphony Orchestra, which I got the opportunity and I was commissioned. And that's the outcome of it, you know.
Yeah, I think when we hear the sitar with those 25, 13 violins and cellos, it sounds as if the sitar has always been a part of that symphony. Maybe your
But
geniosity contributed
we
a lot
had
for
to
it.
do a little cheating there, in the sense that I had to use the microphone amplifier to match the volume, tremendous dynamics of those instruments. So, but just a little, just to bring it up so that it is not
Yeah, it is not too much
suppressed.
mellowed down. Yeah.
Yeah. And it works somehow. Yeah.
Definitely yes. Definitely yes. Would you like to tell our audience about your future projects?
Well, there are a lot of exciting things happening right now. For instance, we just finished yesterday. George was here, George Harrison, who is like a son to me, like my friend, and I love him very much. He was here. Also, another person, Alan Kozlowski, who's like a son to me, and helping in this project. And people from the Angel Records, they were all here. We finished in wrapping up the whole thing, a 4 CD box,
Wonderful.
which is supposed to be coming out sometime late November. And this includes all my, not all, but some of my works going back to almost 50s,
Wonderful.
and different things in my classical sitar solos, then my, as we were talking, these symphony orchestras, then different experimentations in films and all that, and then with Indian group of musicians I have done a lot of new things. So all that is together.
Does this have some pieces from that famous album Shankar Family and Friends?
A few. Okay. We have chosen a few of everything. That Supanamaya, which you like, we have included.
Wonderful.
That. Yeah. And the other big project is the book. This is almost like an autobiography, but it is first being brought out as a special edition. I don't know, about 500 or 1,000 copies only.
Wonderful.
And then it will be out later
Reprinted.
on. Yeah. This is supposed to be coming out in February or March. And then I have another project of recording in India chantings based on all these Vedic and Upanishad chantings, which is a big project also.
Definitely, yes.
So there was this ballet Ghanesham which we were supposed to bring next year, but maybe it will be brought in 97. That's another thing which I'm looking forward to. You haven't seen that, have you?
No, Guruji. I definitely would.
That's very interesting. It made with a lot of
Since you mentioned about the Vedas and because of my very little training in it, how would you want to present the Vedic chantings?
Well, I don't want to make a pop version of it. Definitely. I have too much respect for our tradition, as you said. But I definitely want to keep those intact, but surround it with something that goes within raga frameworks and, so that you hear and you may understand, you may not understand what the meaning is. Of course, you can always read what the meanings are. But the feeling of that should be brought out through singing, through instrumental music. It should weave around that. That's my idea.
Yeah, I very much look
It's
forward.
It's not that it has not been done. Number of people have tried to do, but I hope I can do something better.
Definitely, yes. My hope will be to hear what your treatment of the Samaveda in particular,
right?
Because of its very
Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarika.
Exactly.
Yeah, I'm myself very excited, and I am going to consult a lot of people who really can enlighten me.
Hmm.
In Madras, especially, I'm spending few weeks to meeting a lot of Shastris and
Guruji, what would you like to tell our audience about the upcoming concert here in San Francisco?
in the Bay Area. I have not been there for almost 5 years, I
Yeah.
suppose. And so I'm very excited because I used to go there almost every year. Los Angeles and San Francisco was, so I'm very excited about it. And this particular program is a benefit concert. And a very good friend and one of the greatest doctor, he's known world over, Dr. Kanu Chatterjee, the cardiac specialist.
Yes.
He is actually involved in this, and it is to help this society for the
Cardiac Research Center.
Right.
Yes.
And I'm very much looking forward to it because it's after 5 years, and not only that, I'm introducing two artists in this new. Zakir, of course, is the big attraction. He's going to accompany me on tabla, but I'm going to have a senior student of my, Partha Sarathi, plays the sarod. For the first time, he'll be presented there. And also, I'm very happy to present for the first time in that area my daughter, Anushka,
Wonderful.
who is just 14. So I'm really excited about this program because it is after 5 years I'm going to that area and presenting these two new artists also, which includes my daughter, Anushka.
Wonderful. Guruji, thank you very much for having given us an opportunity to speak to you. I'm sure the entire San Francisco Bay Area is awaiting for your vibrant concert with the new introductions that you just
Well,
mentioned.
in San Francisco area, there's a lot of music and lot of music lovers, even among Indian who are American citizens, but how you call them, American Indians? Or?
American Indians.
Yeah. The only thing complaint I have is that I wish, especially the parents, show a little more interest in classical music. I know they love ghazal, qawwali, filmy music, video, films, and they spend a lot of time and money on that. But if they could also show some interest, it would be not good for them only, but even better for their children.
Definitely.
Who are either born in this country or been brought up from early age, who had never any chance to really open to this tradition of ours, and even if they like pop, rock, punk, or whatever, that doesn't matter. But along with that, if they could also hear, you can play some cassettes in the car while you're driving or at home, let the kids listen to it, be at least familiar. I think that will be doing a great service.
Guruji, just to add to what you just suggested and also mentioned to the parents, the most attractive media today is the media you're just talking on, the television.
Television.
What we have been trying to do is to bring classical music and dance in television, produced in a very professional manner, in a very attractive manner. We would like to have your blessings in presenting some of your compositions on the TV, especially for our youngsters. We are ready to come and do anything at any time. We'll be at your beck and call.
Thank you. Well, I'll do whatever I can, but you also are lucky in a way, excuse me, you are lucky in a way that a lot of musicians, some of the senior ones, some junior ones, new ones, but good musicians from India have been coming a lot in this area. And whenever you find such people, you should take advantage and
Okay.
present them.
Yeah.
That will really be wonderful.
Guruji, thank you very much for having given us an opportunity to speak to you. I'm sure the entire San Francisco Bay Area is awaiting for your vibrant concert. Thank you very much.
Okay then.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Namaste.